Out the Bayou is presented by Community Coffee, America's #1 family-owned retail coffee brand. Nothing brings people together in Louisiana better than a crawfish boil. What's not to love? Take a large boiling pot of water full of the best Bayou seasonings, hundreds of pounds of mud bugs, crawfish, or even crayfish. But we won't tell anyone you said it that way. Maybe. Pinching tails, and well, since this is a family TV show, getting the juice from the heads will instantly put a table of people in a good mood. And why not? The crawfish is Louisiana's favorite seafood. Today on ODB, we will explain to the non-residents just where mud bugs come from. It's simple. Just take the bugs out and you have your answer. Mud. The mud part, however, lies underneath man-made ponds we call crawfish farms. And then there are the wild crawfish that we get from local rivers, basins, bayous, marshes. Okay, you get it. What you're starting to add up in your head is that it must take a lot of crawfish to cure the cravings of ravenous Cajuns down south. And if you think you have figured out that equation, multiply it by 100 and you're still not even close. That's why we brought in an expert.
Probably 350 sacks a day.
The professor of prawns, or let's just stick to crawfish. Bill Pizzolato leads us from the ponds to the boil. And he should know best because no one boils more than his family business, Tony's Seafood in Baton Rouge. It's been a family-run business since inception, and today we will get a hands-on, behind-the-scenes look at how they handle up to 25,000 pounds a day, all while making the best crawfish boil and the #1 fish fry in the country. It's a typical out the bayou kind of day, so sit back and prepare for the biggest spring feast on the planet. I grew up in the outdoors of Louisiana, with a fishing pole in one hand and a camera in the other. One I used to feed my family, the other I used to feed my passion.
Look at the size of that.
Just like that. My dad always said I could tell a good story, and for 25 years, that has been my focus. True tales of real people with a flavor that only comes from straight out the bayou. Stories with great taste.
We didn't set out just to make great coffee. We set out to make something that would bring out the best in people, whether it's the start of someone's day or the end. If what we could bring to the table could bring out the best in others, well, who wouldn't want to share a cup of that? Community Coffee, strong as our roots.
Crawfish season in South Louisiana used to just be a springtime season. But over the years, the huge demand led to a boom in pond-raised crawfish across the state. Today, we are at the Bears farm in Opelousas, Louisiana.
How long has your family been doing this?
Oh, as long as I can remember. My dad did it with his brothers and their dad in the 70s, 80s. They converted it into sugarcane for a short while.
Right.
And then 2008, we went back to 100% grain farm, where we started doing this all over again. Between 2000 and 2008, it was probably my first job I ever had on the farm. At about, I couldn't even tell you the age, 12, 14 years old, I guess.
The Bears, like other farmers, raise crawfish as a secondary crop, first being rice.
So we plant rice and we grow it and harvest it in the early fall, August, September month.
Which explains the shallow ponds. The ponds create the perfect habitat after the rice has been harvested.
The crawfish come back in the rice straw. We seed crawfish, which we take peelers in June, July. Some real small crawfish. We'll buy crawfish out the basin, and we throw those into the rice fields prior to the flowering process. You're filling that up with crawfish in the water. After you cut your rice, when you flood back up, you got crawfish in there. When there's no water, they're down in the ground. I think LSU claims they go as deep as 6 feet in the ground.
Wow.
And then when you bring your water back up, they come back up. They live in the mud, and then they come out in the water when the water's there.
Right.
When it gets cold, when it gets too cold, they'll go back down in the mud, you know, find some insulation, some warm. You know, that's how they live.
When the TV people don't come and it's not cold,
Yeah.
what are you normally pulling out per trap?
Across all the traps, yeah, good average about half a pound,
Right.
which is roughly 10 to a dozen crawfish, depending on size. So if you're doing 16 crawfish in a trap, good size like this, you're doing a pound and a pound per trap. So that's pretty solid. But when you're fishing across, this farm is 225 acres. You know, naturally we're not doing a pound in every trap.
Right.
On the return, we will get the 411 from the real pros on how it's done and just how many man-hours go into growing quality and quantity. Plus, where do all these mud bugs go? Several answers, and we have the guy with all of them.
To where you'll get quality of crawfish.
Back at the A-Bear's rice fields in Opelousas, Louisiana, these rice fields now turn crawfish ponds after the rice harvest. These shallow water fields are the perfect habitat to raise crawfish in the South, as long as Mom Nature plays nice, that is. These farms have now taken a spring season of crawfish and lengthened it up to 6 months now, starting in December.
Started in the mid-70s, we got started with the farm-raised crawfish. But what it did, it gave us an early season to where we could start crawfish in maybe latter part of November, December, January, because the wild crawfish in the Atchafalaya Basin, it just really is dependent upon the water that's coming down the Mississippi River from up north that floods the Atchafalaya Basin. But it gives us a consistent supply to where we can continue the crawfish. When the spillways start in the springtime, it carries us all the way into maybe June, July, or last year we had it up until August. And then at some point in time, they'll get to maturity to where you'll get quality of crawfish. And this is what everybody wants for the crawfish ball, is the sizable crawfish like this. This is what everybody wants. And they'll take the smaller crawfish sometimes, and they'll use that for the peeling plants for the crawfish meat. And they'll process them.
And on the cooking side of things, this time of year, you don't want to boil the crawfish as long because the shell is so soft.
They're more tender, so you got to just adjust your timing.
Right.
They're tender, so you don't need as much time in order to cook them for that long.
When we get to what we call the end of the season, why is it the end of the season?
Well,
See,
what
that's
happens?
what happens when you get latched on and you start talking. Guys just grab you by the finger and start pinching and saying, "Guess what? I'm the boss." That hurt.
Probably the latter part of April into May, you'll start seeing they'll drain the right field ponds, and they'll start burying to get ready for next year. But then we have the crawfish in the Atchafalaya Basin, the wild crawfish, will continue us all the way through May, June, July, just depending on the water that's available.
Right.
So right after Easter, the weather's going to warm up and the water's going to start coming down. You're going to see more production in the ponds as well as the spillway, and then there's going to be more opportunity for people to get crawfish at a price, especially when after Easter normally the price drops.
Right.
So people be doing crawfish balls in the backyard sometimes a couple times a week. It gets more affordable and the quality gets better. I was just talking to Zach, and he was telling me in the mid-70s we had somewhere around 45,000 acres, and now after talking to Zachary, he was telling me they got as much as anywhere between 140 to maybe 180,000 acres of crawfish farms that does the production, for the crawfish industry. So with that, for the retail end as well as the processing end, which is a little 1 pound bags of crawfish tails
Right.
that people take home, they don't have to worry about peeling, they can use it in an etouffee or a gumbo or whatever. It gives us a really diversified crop to where we can do multiple things with.
The farms help with tons, but the majority of crawfish in Louisiana are still harvested out of the Atchafalaya Basin that sits just off of the Mississippi River.